Hello everyone and welcome to our PrepTalk, Lockdown of the Lecture Theatre and the Impact of Virtual Learning. My name is Martina and I'm the moderator of this webinar on behalf of Prep team. Our speakers today is Dr. Benjamin Butter, Jill Holden, Dr. David Grundy, Dave Eason and Kirsty Clark. You will receive valuable information about the virtual education and can it fully replace the live classroom interaction. The webinar will take you to pros and cons of the virtual learning and how it impacts on the student's experience. You will be able to ask your questions during the entire webinar by typing them in the questions box, and our speaker will take time to give you an answer at the end of this session. Before we start, let's check the sound. Could you please write in the chat box which country are you joining us from? Okay, it seems that everything is set. And before we start with the presentation, I would like to ask you one question. And you will have about 10 to 15 seconds to answer this quick poll. I see that some answers are still coming, so we will wait a couple of seconds before we end the poll. Okay, I'm sharing the results right now, and I'm giving the floor to you guys.
Welcome everyone, and thank you all for joining us in conversation today on our topic, Lockdown of the Lecture Theatre, the Impact of Virtual Learning. Now, 2020, the year none of us could have imagined, the impact of coronavirus has had global reach on individuals, small and large businesses alike, and of course the education sector. Globally, there are 1.2 billion children affected by school closures, whilst universities around the world have had to close their campuses during lockdown periods. As campuses have been made safe to allow for face-to-face teaching, the lecture theatre has been replaced with Zoom and other video conferencing platforms. Now, in 2014, Newcastle University hosted a learning technology event geared towards showcasing the technology that students took for granted, such as mobile phones, virtual reality gaming equipment, video calling, and the such like, and how this could be implemented into the learning environment. One lecture was even titled, Past Their Sell-by Date, the End of the Old-Fashioned Lecture Theatre. Considering this was 6 years ago, it can be agreed that the lecture theatre has not seen its end. It still very much has a major role in the learning and teaching student experience. Even before COVID-19, there was already high growth in adoption in education technology, with global edtech investments reaching nearly $19 billion in 2019, and the overall market for online education projected to reach $350 billion by 2025. Whether it's language apps, virtual tutoring, video conferencing tools, or online learning software, there has been a significant surge in usage since COVID-19. Now, generally, there is a long transition period when changes are made to delivery and teaching of a degree program. Both academics and students are giving training and skills packages and time to become familiar with software and how to use the programs. 2020 has seen an instant switch from predominantly present in-person teaching to a 100% online model. Our speakers are here today to discuss the impact this has had and could have for the virtual learning model and the student experience. They'll also discuss the consequences for future graduates in their career, and could these be positive outcomes? We hope you enjoyed the discussion, and we would like to ask you to engage with our speakers by asking questions in the chat function. We will be responding to these once the discussion is over. So initially, I am going to ask each member of our panel to have a brief introduction to themselves and their work with digital learning and employer engagement. Jill, can I start with you?
Thank you very much, Kirsty, and hello everybody, and welcome to the presentation today. My name is Mrs. Jill Holden, and I'm a chartered management accountant. I've worked in a wide range of businesses, from small family-owned businesses right up through to multinational PLCs, and a little bit in the public sector as well. I've also set up and run my own practice, and whilst I was doing this, I started to give some seminars at Newcastle University, and I fell in love with teaching. And so when the opportunity came up to become a full-time member of staff, that's what I did, and I joined the university about 7 years ago. In my personal life, I've always been interested in technology. I've always been interested in cameras and IT and the latest software and programs. And so using technology in my teaching is a natural progression for me, but it's to enhance the experience. It's not just for the sake of it. So I started with Microsoft Teams about 3 years ago, which was shortly after it had been launched by Microsoft. And I introduced that into my group work module, where it was an absolute game changer for the students on that module, allowing them to work collaboratively, allowing them to meet when it wasn't necessarily possible to all meet up in person and find a physical room on campus. And so that was, you know, a massive shift in the module, even though at that time it was taught largely in person. And I've also incorporated other aspects to support students, such as Class 1 notebook and interactive question and answer programs within those large lectures, within those traditional lectures. And I find doing this within the modules that I teach aligns very well with developments in the workplace. And then the students find that the transition into the workplace is very smooth, and they can move from their education environment into the workplace without too many difficulties. That's me.
Thank you. David, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there, my name's Dr. David Grundy. I'm Director of Digital Education at Newcastle University Business School. I joined last year after spending 19 years within higher ed. In terms of sort of my interests, my background, I have a deep interest in digital curriculums. I have a deep interest in how we use technology within education to both facilitate teaching and learning to how it goes, but also how we add to the student experience, and to talk a little bit what Jill's already mentioned, how we add to the employability of our students by using these technologies. So for myself, just to give a bit of personal information, I've been a lifelong geek, if you like. I've always been very involved in the technologies. My house is filled with gadgets which have been bought from yesteryear and have now forgotten. And very much that for me is maybe the difference between my personal and my professional life. And in terms of my professional sort of evaluation of technologies, I'm always looking for what is going to generate the most value for the students. I'm very aware that a scattergun approach just does not work, and we need to be very focused in what truly is going to be useful for students and their experience at university.
Great, thank you. And finally, but not least, Ben, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Benjamin Bader. I'm Senior Lecturer in International Human Resource Management and the Deputy Head of the Leadership, Work and Organization Subject Group, which is one of the 4 departments, if you will, in the business school. I joined Newcastle a little bit over 2 years ago, coming over from Germany. And basically, I can agree with everything that has been said, including the natural born geek. So I like the idea. As a kid of the 1980s, if you wanted to engage with technology, I think it was way more difficult than today. So I mean, my 3-year-old is absolutely savvy with the iPad already and knows that stuff. So when it, growing up in the time when you actually had to basically get access to that, like a lot of or understanding the technology behind what was necessary to make use of it. And I think that learning helped me to bring it into the classroom and make use of technology when basically when it's necessary. Like examples, even in large lectures, I used to use QR codes to have live polls, just like the one we did just now, to gauge the opinion of the audience, even before lockdown. But particularly now, of course, I use like collaborative tools like Mural, which is a massive online whiteboard. Everybody can use it at the same time and things like that, just to basically make use of technology that's there to make our life easier. And as Jill already said, the transition from being a student into the workplace is a lot smoother, because you're certainly going to be dealing with these tools later.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much. So I'm going to start with you, actually, Ben. And there's going to be a few questions that I'm going to ask to all of the different panelists. But Ben, how has the lockdown in March impacted on you and your mode of delivery for teaching?
Well, first and foremost, I'm sitting in the attic right now, so it's certainly a change in location. But apart from that, it was a very steep learning curve. So in March, it was a different story. So nobody, we knew that COVID is out there and it seems to be a danger. And then there was a lockdown announced, and different universities across the country were shutting down. And when it affected us, which I think we're one of the last to actually shut down and move to online, it was really a transition during the semester. So right now, we need to switch to online. So back then, basically, it was more firefighting and reactive. So I can recall thinking about how to best speak in my lectures and create something that's valuable. I reached out to David at the time in terms of software. What can I use? Programs like Camtasia, which came very handy to produce, well, I think what is decent online lectures. But it was all really do it now, do it quickly. Then during summer, and when it became more clear that we may be starting with something that is hybrid or eventually fully online, the benefit was that we had a lot of time to prepare for that. So other than just taking our slides and our content and talk to the computer and click on record, we were in a position to just add more information and knowledge how to best do that. Because in a traditional Russell Group university, it's not that we are like trained online educators. So we had to adapt to that. We got tremendous support, and the idea to not reinvent the wheel, but do what others did before, and was helpful to create something that is at least what we know now, since the semester is almost over, actually. The first feedback we got, students seem to be fairly happy with the idea of bite-sized chunks. So yeah, particular lecture, pre-recorded lecture parts that are videos to watch, additional quizzes, other exercises, but then also synchronous online sessions where just as this now, like I'm sitting in my attic and you're sitting wherever you are, we're having a Zoom conversation on the topic. So you prepare the things whenever you have time to do that, and then at the same time, the synchronous session, we keep up and match the learning progress. Has been shown to be very valuable, and I personally believe we're making the best out of the situation.
Fascinating, honestly. And you talk about the impact on academics, but Jill, you mentioned you obviously have built online teaching into one of your modules with Ernst & Young. So how have students that you've been teaching taken this transition to sort of fully remote learning?
Yes, that's right, Kirsty. So I've been, over the years, I've been working very closely with EY, with an associate partner to EY in the Newcastle office. And I'd been watching the developments and how audit had moved online to, from everybody having to be at the client or everybody having to meet up to review the audit files, and that it had moved on to an online system where everybody could see the progress of the job as it went through, and who was responsible for what, and who was when things were signed off. So I took that information, that model, and built that into the group work module that I was teaching, and used Teams within it, so that when the students then have gone into stage 3. So this was when they were in their second year of undergrad. When they went into stage 3 and this happened, this move to online learning, and then when they've come back, they are prepared with those skills to deal with information online, that they're prepared with those time management and organizational skills because they had to do it in their project work in the last academic year. So what I found was that they've made that transition very well, and they've been able to focus on the learning rather than having to spend time gaining confidence with the programs or gaining confidence with the skills, because they already had developed those last year. So I found that for those students that I'd worked with, then they've moved on to that, they've made that transition into online learning quite smoothly and confidently. That's I think a key part of it as well, the confidence, because if you've got confidence in using something, then you'll go ahead and you'll learn more about it, whereas if you don't know where to start, then that's when it can be very difficult.
Yeah, I totally agree. So from the teaching and the learning aspect, obviously you say they've got into it confidently, but I'll put this to all of you. What about from a community and a social aspect? You know, what sort of feedback have students shared? David, to you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've just been reading through some of our minutes from student voice committees. So we at Newcastle University, we have a system where students go along and talk about what they're experiencing on their programs, and this is very much student-led. And it's really interesting what students are saying about the online experience, in that they themselves are really valuing those interactivities, that time they get to actually have a discussion with the lecturer and their fellow students. And I think very much the online experience, it makes those interactions so much more valuable to both us as lecturers, but also especially the students. Community is, particularly in an online environment, creating that collegiate sort of group of students is always going to be a great challenge. It's a challenge at the best of times, even when students are physically at the university. It's a challenge in an online environment when your students are dispersed, sometimes all around the world. What we have found in terms of student feedback is where cohorts are sort of very tight and studying sort of the same sort of subject areas, and particularly when they're well motivated, particularly at postgraduate levels, the feedback from those students is actually different than, say, undergrads. So for example, I have been teaching some of our executive MBA students this year, a group of very well motivated students, and those students themselves have sort of created little tight-knit study groups to support each other already, while at undergraduate level, those might be things which might need a lot more structure to actually occur. They're not currently occurring very naturally. So I think the various levels and maybe academic experience that maybe the people studying at university have might be contributing towards a different level of community engagement.
Ben, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah. So I agree, and you said a very interesting point, David, in terms of the interaction. So the major difference to a classroom setting is the distance is similar to everybody. So even, I mean, especially if you're talking about larger groups, 50, 60, 70 students, I mean, the interaction, the component of interaction is already determined on where you sit. Are you in the first row? You have a seat in the back. The audio quality, like everything, the visuals, are you far away from the projector or not? Like, you have your slides. You have a lot of things basically distracting you, potentially seating, or just the whole environment is different. Like for some it's too warm, for some it's too hot, some want more cold, some want more fresh air, less fresh. You can basically set up your home office. So you can turn on the heat if you want to, you can chill, you can have coffee here, you can like anything that floats your boat. And the most important thing, you are in the similar interaction as everybody else. So there's no advantage or disadvantage where you sit, who's sitting next to you, nobody's chatting to you. So I think that is a big advantage, although of course you need discipline to not like browse off on Facebook or do other stuff. So if you choose to join a session and you decide to be fully there, I think your learning experience can be a lot better than in a normal setting, if you will, because you can just take more out of it.
Really interesting. Jill,
Yeah,
anything?
I think it's a fantastic opportunity. I think that the students that I've spoken to that I've worked with in the smaller groups, they've had an opportunity to learn about the person behind the what you look like. So in a lecture theatre, yes, you might recognize people each week, but you won't necessarily know where they come from or anything about them. But because in an online environment, you know, we work on introducing ourselves, and we find out a little bit more just by sort of those more sociable conversations. Then they're telling me they're actually finding out more about each other. So where are they? What, you know, are they in a different time zone? We've used things like Flipgrid, where students can have recorded a short introduction to themselves, and some students have shared some of their interests and their hobbies. So we've had people playing their instruments, we've had digital art shared on there. So, you know, that they're telling us that there is actually opportunity to learn more about your cohort than perhaps you would do, although you would physically see them, you might not find out about them in those large, in a large lecture. You obviously do when you're in a smaller group, but I think that's happening whether you're online or in person. So yeah, I think we've managed to create those feelings of community, albeit it has to be done in different ways.
Oh, I think that's really important, though. You're talking about relationships, and you know, that's one thing that, you know, we all aim for as humans. So now, I mentioned in my introduction that, you know, back in 2014, so long ago, Newcastle University hosted a learning technology event that was geared towards, you know, showcasing all of this new technology. Now, David, do you think that universities, and I use the plural, universities, do you think that they've fully embraced these technologies?
I think that to start to answer the question, you've got to look at the university as a sort of unit in itself and how it makes decisions. And I think from the external viewpoint, universities look like this single monolithic entity, where the reality is universities have very different decision-making levels within them, and within those levels, how they adopt and how they take on board technologies can be very different. That said, it is 2020, and rules are meant to be broken in 2020, and Newcastle University itself, despite at a university level usually taking very long lead times to make sizable purchase decisions, went out and bought a university-wide Zoom license within, I think, 2 weeks of COVID. So this is the year to break those rules, and maybe the year to be a bit more agile as well. But just to speak in general terms, I think at a university level, purchase decisions, because it is usually for the entirety of the organization, are very well considered. There are a lot of stakeholders involved, so there is lots of getting the product spec right for all of the potential users. And because of those lead times, as an institution, at an institutional level, you're normally not as agile as what you might be say in the private sector for new technologies. You're usually very considered. I'll give you an example. We're currently looking at digital exam platforms, and I think it's going to be about the next 12 to 14 months which I'm going to be involved in that, and throughout that time we'll be testing about 8 different platforms. So a lot of testing, a lot of rigor, the spec, which we have very long, and so forth. So at that level, decisions can sometimes be quite lengthy because of the weight of them. At a school level, I think we're a lot more agile. So if we look at the business school, for example, we went from evaluating LinkedIn Learning, which is a platform that we have for all of our students at Newcastle University Business School. We went from evaluating it in January to the purchase of the contract, which started in June. So, and effectively in the first 3 months, we knew we were going to get that. It was just a bit of contract negotiation. So I think at a school level, we're much more agile. And then layered across that, you have the concepts of academic freedom, which are core, particularly at a Russell Group institution such as Newcastle University, where we really value individual lecturers having control of what they are deciding to use within the classroom and what systems they wish to implement, but also a lot of trust that these are professional academics who are trying to do the best for their students and therefore are exploring. They're looking for new technologies to use in the classroom. And so for me, it's very much about empowering these individuals to explore some of these technologies. It's about, I for example, within my role, I have a fund called the Digital Innovation Fund, which I use to support academics in exploring new ideas. Some of them sort of are a little bit off the wall in terms of where they want to go with these ideas. But I think it's very important that we support academics to explore that academic freedom in their discipline, because that's the final layer I was going to talk about. The discipline very much has an influence as well on what type of technologies you're attempting to use. And so the same technologies that might be very useful in, say, a HR or an accounting realm, perhaps in economics, just aren't technologies they wish to use and might not be suitable for how they classically wish to teach their discipline. Maybe they've got a completely different method. So I think we are at a school level very agile for moving towards new technologies, and we're very supportive of people trying to implement new technologies. I think we can't get caught up in this concept of being universities, because while we might be universities, we don't make decisions as one big monolithic entity.
No, that leads quite nicely into my next question to all of you. So, I mean, there's been an extensive amount of research carried out by a variety of think tanks on the changing aspirations and students, lecturers, and the leaders involved with the learning and teaching experience. So, you know, from the lecture theatre to hard copy books, you know, moving on to electronic libraries. So, would you say that that's true in your experience? Your, you know, aspirational changes of minds in how we're progressing. Ben.
Definitely. So from a lecturer's perspective, I can see a lot of change in both in the or maybe even with the leadership hat on, like the change in mindset in among all our academic staff and how quickly they adapted. I definitely can see that change. And in terms of how things work and the agility David was talking about, just get back to the example because it nicely fits with the Camtasia, that software recording decision. I mean, it was a decision like of a matter of hours, actually. It was like finding it out, checking out, and then getting the license to get going, because that week lockdown was announced. The next week the lecture needed to be online. So we didn't have time to basically found a committee and think about what we can do and how we do it. It was basically we needed to be reactive, and this is something that worked fantastically in the time of crisis, and then particularly later on. So the LinkedIn Learning license, just another example, that was like basically we got it at light speed, and so this evaluation and bringing things forward was really interesting to see from a lecturer's perspective, and therefore we really. Well, I think we're making the best out of the situation, and it's an exogenous shock. So nobody chose to do that. It's not that we decided to deliver an all online program because we want to get into competition with Open University. It's an exogenous decision. We can't do anything about it, which is coping. And with that in mind, I think when we hopefully get out of this COVID situation sometime next year, I think there will be a lot of things that stick, and a lot of skills that have been built up, and a lot of technology that's been brought in, and COVID maybe was a catalyst for that, and we will benefit from that in the long term, because even if we are beyond COVID and we can meet again because everybody's vaccinated and it's all back to normal, I don't see why we shouldn't keep a certain element of online learning.
Jill, I see you nodding along enthusiastically.
Yes, definitely. I mean, talk about the changing aspirations of students. First of all, I noticed very quickly as we, even before we started coming back in September to start the new academic year, I noticed that students were contacting me, you know, is there something that I can be working on to enhance my CV? Or, you know, the students who knew they were joining us, you know, have we got the electronic reading list yet? So there was definitely a change in their aspirations. And then since then, I've noticed students who, you know, I try and connect with all my students through LinkedIn and through other platforms and through the personal tutoring system that we have here at Newcastle University. You know, I'm noticing students that are looking for those micro certifications, so maybe in the use of Excel or in the use of accounting software, for example. And so their aspirations are definitely changing. They're definitely grasping these online learning opportunities, not just for their curriculum and for their assessed part of their course, but for those other opportunities that are out there to enhance their CV. In terms of lecturers and leaders involved with online learning and teaching, I'm, you know, involved with communities of educators right through the education system, so at all levels of education, but also you know, specifically in higher education. And we share good practice and we support each other. And that's not just within the Newcastle University, that's, you know, wider networks and communities. So that's a great way, you know, like Ben and David have spoken about. It would normally, to produce an online course would normally take, maybe it would take months or years even of design and things and the digital skills development that would require. But the shift has been so rapid, but not at the expense of quality, because the tools are there and the training materials and support is there within those networks and those communities. So I think educators and students have been able to move very quickly into this new space with a very good teaching and learning experience for both sides, for students and lecturers.
David, you would agree with that as your position?
Yeah, I think my experience of what we've had over the last sort of 9 months is very much about the acceleration of trends. It's very much about trends and patterns which we've been seeing for the last 3 to 4, maybe even longer, up to 8 years. And you can see a comparator would be the high street, to take a comparative example. We are seeing retail on the high street being utterly changed by what was a trend anyway, but now is a trend that's been accelerated because of the COVID period. So to take that to our educational example, we have seen the increasing use of ebooks throughout our module. Now students very much want ebooks because that is the main way they wish to access it. We have seen lecturers make greater use of electronic resources, and one of the first things that I did when I came to Newcastle University Business School was to map out all of the different resources which surrounded modules. There is a considerable amount. We have sort of platforms for getting external speakers, HS Talks, and various other sort of resource platforms supplied by the library and so forth. And these, I looked at the usage statistics, and these were being used, and they were there, but they were maybe used in a more niche way by certain lecturers. And I think what we've seen over the last sort of 9 months is many more lecturers moving with that trend, looking at what they are teaching, they're re-evaluating their teaching, they're re-evaluating how they teach and what resources they have to support that teaching, and they're starting to access these resources, they're starting to get on board with some of these methods which some people have used for many years. So Jill was speaking, for example, about her experiences with Teams, and I think we've all, those of us in higher ed, got a lot more used to things like Teams and Zoom and so forth. But some people have been doing that for many years. We're just now on the highway. Well, we've got off the little country roads which we're all meandering through, and we're all heading up the sort of A1 on the highway now together. And that's the important thing. We are experiencing this together, and sometimes that can be a little bit traumatic. So we can share some of that trauma, and sometimes when we get the wins, it's good to share those wins as well.
I think just for context for all of our international listeners, the A1 is one of the longest roads through the UK. It is a main road, so we're happily on that main highway now. So we talk a lot about, you know, universities, higher education. It's what we all work as. But Ben, obviously, you've got a huge amount of experience. So the digital landscape and employers, you know, is there anything universities can do to assist their corporate partners, you know, with this switch in business models?
So to give you some sort of background information, I do consulting projects, and I'm on the board of a large international HR professional organization, and therefore have direct access to senior HR people in large companies such as General Electric, major banks, and other large companies. And during the last couple of months, we had a couple of board meetings and discussions about how to deal with that. And in terms of technology, to be fair, I mean, it's a mixed bag in a way, but to be fair, in terms of getting access to technology, companies are faster than universities. Let's face it, they are quicker in acquiring that. But in terms of exploiting that and making use of it, maybe not particularly an advantage for employers. So it's more a question of how to train people and onboard people. So we can certainly assist there, but the more important thing is probably the idea of having people working from home. So academia is traditionally a sector where a lot of people work from home. So I think even outside lockdown, like lots of professors commute because they don't live in town, lots of change. And even if you live in the same town, you don't necessarily have to be in the office every single day. So when you do your research and you're at home at your desk, that's an environment where you're disturbed. And that was actually never a question. It just works out. So when you're teaching face to face, you come down to the business school, and if not, you work from anywhere. You get your laptop. That's all right. The two main problems related to that employers, what they were talking about. First of all, the lack of equipment, not just the lack of equipment of laptops or computers. You can take that, but just many academics have a little desk or space in their house where can they be working from home, proper chair and things like that. And if not, the business school was supporting them to get that. Now, in many companies, all of a sudden, people were not used to work from home. They don't have the space, and more importantly, the mindset. Often, particularly by some managers, say, if you're not in the company, you're not working, and that's a very problematic mindset. Because if I assume as a leader, our staff is working from anywhere, and therefore they maybe, I don't know, play PlayStation, do their laundry, whatever, and I don't trust them. And I want to control them, and therefore I ask them to come in. That's actually a waste of potential and energy, because there's so many benefits to that. And I think universities can help companies in order to, well, give employees the benefit of the doubt and trust. And I think lockdown has done that to a certain extent, because I mean, other than financial problems of companies who couldn't really sell anymore, I haven't heard of companies going bankrupt because employees didn't do stuff. So, and like the idea of working from a distance and to collaborate is something academia knows a lot about. Universities know a lot about, and they can bring that in. Also, in terms of research and like, most of my co-authors don't live in Newcastle. They are not even at the university. So I've got co-authors in the United States, in Australia, in the United Arab Emirates. So ever since I'm this job, I had to deal with time differences, schedule online meetings. I mean, we used Skype back in the days. Now it's Zoom, but the idea is pretty much the same. When it was more popular, we started using Dropbox to exchange files. Now there's a OneNote integration, and it's just much more integrated, and more things are possible. They just need to be exploited in a positive sense.
Absolutely, trust is massively important. So moving back into the teaching side of things. So Jill, how do you see the development, so moving forward, of the teaching and learning experience for not just the students but also for the lecturers?
Yes, thanks, Kirsty. I mean, the current situation, as we've already discussed, has developed the digital enhanced learning landscape at a much faster pace than would otherwise have happened. And I think this does bring massive benefits for both students and lecturers. So there's now the opportunity for lecturers to deliver their material in different ways. So for example, bite-sized small videos, worked examples. So I use a device and a pen, so I can highlight things, I can talk through the workings rather than just showing the solution in its entirety. I can illustrate where different numbers and different figures come from. There's the opportunity to learn in a variety of different ways as well. We don't just have to continue in the future going back to the one mode of delivery, which was traditional lectures and then maybe small group seminars. I see it in the future as being a blended experience, and that, as I say, is benefits for lecturers in what materials they can procure and deliver to students, but also in students accessing those materials. So, for example, someone with caring responsibilities or someone who finds large numbers of people a very stressful experience, they're going to have the opportunity to access their learning and their experience in a way that is suited to them, because there's going to be a variety of modes available to them in the future. And another thing that I think will help the experience for both lecturers and students again is the tools that are now available. I mean, I can't imagine trying to do this maybe 5 years ago, but now the tools that are available, things like immersive reader, read aloud, the ability to dictate. Sometimes if I've got a long email, I'll use dictate. So students can use say presenter coach in PowerPoint in order to practice for their presentations. So I think the experience is just going to get better and better with those developments as we move forward in the higher education landscape.
Ben or David, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just add that for me, and this is maybe coming odd as someone who's director of digital education, for me, the technology is always an enabler of education occurring. And it very much, the technology and its use, particularly by students, very much comes down to the attributes that you bring to the table, particularly if you're studying at a distance. And I think, I mean, I personally, we've got LinkedIn Learning at the university. One of my favorite videos is a video called Becoming Indistractable. And I think becoming indistractable in this world that we live in, particularly I've got 3 screens here. It's so easy if you're in a meeting or if you're in a seminar class to be watching something else and not give it your full attention. And focus in this world is so incredibly important. And bringing those key attributes, focus, hard work, and trying to motivate yourself to study at a distance. These are key attributes that, while if you're at university, if you're physically here, are very important to you succeeding. They're equally as important in an online environment. And I think there are more things to distract you in an online learning environment. You're sitting at a computer, so many things at your fingertips, and to just focus on that work that the university lecturers provided you, as interesting as it can be, sometimes we do get distracted. So I think we can't forget that human element. And while we're always encouraging students to engage with our subject, engage with the technology to enable that education to occur, I don't think we can ignore that students themselves need to take personal responsibility for their development of their focus, their development of their work ethic towards the study. It's a two-way street. It is a partnership in learning at university. It isn't just about us providing a service. It's about the student meeting the challenge of that learning environment as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent point, if I may add, because the two-way street is absolutely true. So, and I'm guilty as charged here. I have the attention span of a toddler, so I really need to force myself to get focused. But the point is, if you're aware of that and do that, that's fine. If you look at the virtual learning environment, we're using Canvas. It's brilliant. It's well structured. It's lecturers are putting a tremendous effort in there to structure the course in a way that you can go through. But in a way, it's like a gym membership. So if you have this gym membership and don't go to the gym, or you go for the sake of going, but instead of doing a good cardio start and your workout, you just hang out there and chat with friends, it does, you won't see any improvement. It's similar with the learning experience. It just having Canvas access because you're an enrolled student, or even if you have it, just clicking it through and let the lecture run in the background at the same time, watch South Park. I mean, it may be entertaining and you get your day done, but it is not the learning experience you're getting. And in Germany we have a saying that literally it translates, you can't get the horse to the water, but it needs to drink on its own. So we do everything in our power and beyond to make the potential learning experience as fantastic as possible, but students need to do the learning and students need to engage with that, because if you don't do that, the very best outstanding learning experience online you can imagine won't get you any success.
Very true. Very true. So David, it was interesting you were talking about, the speed at which decisions can happen. But do you think there are steps that universities need to, should, or could take to sort of future-proof their technology for online learning?
I mean, that's a really interesting word, that sort of word, future-proof. Future-proofing is all about not becoming irrelevant in a modern context. And I mean, I was at one of the last big technology conferences this year, that DigiFest in the UK, and we had a great speaker. He was a senior leader at a Russell Group university like Newcastle is, and it was interesting. He said it's actually much easier to get a vice chancellor convinced that investing £50 million in a brand new big building, it's much easier to do that than convince them to spend a similar amount of money in digital infrastructure. And I think maybe there is a change which needs to occur in how universities are viewing the investments that they are making in our digital infrastructure. My gut instinct is, as many things have changed in these COVID times, and this has been a spark for a lot of change, that many universities are currently looking at their estate, they're looking at their investment decision making, they're looking towards the future of their requirements, and they're starting to make pretty long-term decisions as to where they wish to invest in. And I think that is the best way to future-proof yourself. It is to make a commitment towards investing into your digital infrastructure. Not precisely what it is, because what it is something you need to remain agile about, you need to be aware about, you need to be constantly on the outlook to see what is on the horizon as well. So not just what's going to be the great movement in technology in the next 5 years, but what might even be in 10 years time. Is VR going to be a major component in the next 10 years when we get the next generation of computers and so forth? We're on the cusp of widespread 5G, for example. How is that going to affect our online provision when everyone's got very, very fast speed internet connections in their pockets? So I think how we look at our investment in digital infrastructure is going to be the key over certainly the next 5 years to future-proofing ourselves as universities, and an acceptance, and this is sometimes the hard thing to get across, an acceptance that digital infrastructure depreciates and you've got to reinvest in it. So that's something that doesn't occur with physical infrastructure. We don't build a building and then effectively it's all written off in the next 5 years because it's depreciated in value. But even as accountants, we don't depreciate that fast. But I think when you're talking about investments in digital infrastructure, there are different timelines which you're talking about if you wish to remain at the cutting edge of the environment.
Really, really interesting. So I'm gonna come to Ben and your expert opinion in how this new digital age of learning could have a positive or negative impact on the careers of those students who are graduating, you know, having had a portion of their education taking place virtually. So like these are students who, you know, haven't chosen to learn at a distance or part-time. These are, you know, the students that we've got in the UK and around the world with us now.
Well, I'm going to start it with a negative here, because to be fair, I mean, we wouldn't be sitting here if we hadn't had that horrible outbreak of COVID and that force to do that. And although it's been a while since I was a student, the student experience outside the studying will certainly be a different one. And I can imagine as a student being in Newcastle, living in Jesmond, particularly the nights and the weekends and everything around is something you're certainly missing out. But the fact is, you're going to miss out on that anyway, because everything is closed down right now, whether you study or not. Also some personal relationships, networking for your future careers, where you just get to know your classmates better and find out that you're on the same wavelength and get along really well, and then maybe lifelong friendships will evolve. That's certainly going to be harder. However, I am very, very confident that in a few months' time the situation is getting better. We hopefully get out with that. But it is something that will certainly have not the most positive effect. However, the positive effect, or one of the real values here, is if you manage to cope well with that online learning experience, I think you develop a skill set that is very much related to time management, self-management, project management, process ownership. So you are essentially designing your curriculum in the way when you do one. So if you go back to the gym membership, and you have a 24/7 gym, and then Canvas is nothing else than a 24/7 gym for your brain. So if you are an early bird and want to get things out of the way and then enjoy the day, get up at 6, log on, and start working. Do that. That's absolutely fine. You don't have to wait till I'm in the classroom at 10 or 11. At the same time, if you work better at night, log on at night, work then, stay up late, sleep in the morning, crawl out of bed at 11, start your day later. That's some of the benefits of a student you may have to a certain extent, well, synchronous sessions aside. But basically the idea of structuring it for you and make it work for you, and learning how to structure that is something that I think comes very handy for employers and for yourself in your future professional career. But in order to achieve that, as I said before, it needs discipline. And this discipline is something you can learn. So, and we certainly have a lot of guidance in terms of how to do that as well, and then help you to help yourself, if you will. But if you develop the discipline, that understanding of this is the job that needs to get done, and I want to excel, I need to chip in, go the extra mile, but to structure it in a way like a job project. I think this is the skills that you need later in your professional career, when you are in your first years, later when you become a leader, that gets on top. So before you can manage and lead others, I think you need to be able to lead yourself, and this is a great experience to work on your self leadership skills.
Very, very good point. Very good point. Jill and David, do you have anything to add to that at all?
Yeah, just to say, I agree, and you know, the term we can use to wrap up a lot of this is resilience, and you know, the students that are working have been forced into this online environment are having to develop that all of those skills and that resilience to deal with it and cope with it, and all of these skills are, you know, going to stand them in such good stead in their future careers, because they're transferable into the work environment. So yeah, I agree with, you know, some fantastic points made there, Ben. Thanks.
David?
Yeah, just to add my comments as well. I think we have learnt a lot from the last major sort of recession, which was the financial crisis, and what we know from that point was that those individuals who were coming out of university who'd invested the most into their education were the ones who had the lowest levels of unemployment. They had the best job prospects, and so just as a general trend, we know that students investing heavily in their personal development in terms of doing a degree, a master's degree, maybe even higher degrees, has a great impact on their ability to ride out tough economic times. And I think it's no shock that tough economic times are upon us, given the sort of information we've been seeing both in the press and is predicted by various think tanks and so forth. I think for me, in terms of this digital age of learning, the biggest change is going to be in the workplace that these students are going to enter. What they're currently experiencing in their educational environment will also be what's expected in their workplace environment. They'll be expected to work with clients at a distance. They'll be expected much more to work with systems which enable team working at a distance and so forth. And I think the trends and patterns which I was discussing earlier are trends and patterns which are accelerating very much in the workplace environment. Are these big office blocks going to be in existence in the middle of city centres in the next not 10 years, but 3 or 4 or 5 years? We're going to see seismic changes in workplace environments over the next period. We're going to come out of this recession, which we're about to enter, a very different looking economy. And my thought is that those students who've invested the most into their skills are the students who are going to do the best when they come out the other side of this. And I'll just leave it there as a positive.
I'm going to bring that there as a positive end. That was absolutely fascinating. I mean, honestly, thank you all for some quite amazing insights. I've definitely learned something today. Now, I'm hoping that everyone that did join us really enjoyed that, and I hope that you got a lot from it. I'm going to ask our organizer to place up a final poll, because we'll be interested in seeing the results to this. And the question in the poll is going to be, would you now study a postgraduate program that had a blended learning model of teaching? So that's going to be placed up on screen. If you can take part in that, we'll be really fascinated to see what your whether any of you have changed your mind for the positive or the negative. All of this information, you know, we're happy to chat with everyone, but what I would say now is this is an absolute perfect opportunity for you to put your questions to our panelists. So my colleague Dave, who has just popped up by magic, he's going to direct your questions to our panelists. So please don't be shy. Pop your queries into our chat, and we'll hopefully have some great answers for you.
Okay. Yes. Thanks, Kirsty, and thanks for everyone for taking part. I've been seeing quite a lot of comments come through while the session's been going on. All very complimentary to the panelists, thanking you for your insights and the opinions that you've shared. We have got quite a few questions come in, so if we can kind of get through these as quickly as we can. I'll start with Jill. Jill, question came in, have you got any tips for how to control or maintain the interest of an audience who are going through virtual learning?
You're on mute, Jill.
Jill, we've lost your audio.
Thank you. So first thing when you're presenting, you want to maintain engagement is make sure your microphone's turned on. Yeah, so know your audience, know what their interests are, and try and connect with them as well. So try and know what might be affecting them. Try and in the lecture theatre we sort of try and teach with emotional intelligence. So try and take that online as well, and try and vary what you're doing. Try and add information, but also add interactivity, or just ask people to take a moment to think about things. Lots of different types of speeding up your delivery a little bit, slowing it down, varying the pitch, varying the tone. All of those kind of things can help to make watching. I mean, I've logged into webinars and things that are of personal interest to me, and after sort of 10 minutes I'm thinking, oh, this isn't going too well. And practicing delivery as well can help you to test your pace and test your delivery style. So yeah.
Okay, and another question coming from Lee is, have you seen any reduction in the average attention span of students when you're delivering virtually rather than in person?
As in, do you mean if we know whether they've logged off or left the session or something like that, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he follows it up actually, Joe, with sort of saying there's been lots of research in the past and sort of historical kind of guidance around attention spans and kind of recommended instruction sort of times. Has that changed when you're delivering digitally rather than in person?
Leap in there as well. I'd say yes, but that's a trend that's occurred not in the last 9 months, but over the last 20 years I've been involved in education, to be absolutely honest. I think many students find it very difficult to utterly focus for a full 50 minutes delivered lecture. I remember this was about 5-6 years ago at a different university. I watched an amazing lecturer, incredible gravitas at the front of the class, delivering what I considered, sitting at the back doing the peer review, to be the most amazing lecture on ethics, and I was really engaged. And I was horrified to be looking around the classroom to see some people playing on their laptops and hiding behind their screens about 15 minutes in. And I think the fact is the students right now have so many distractions. I talked about in my talk before the becoming indistractable talk. I watched that myself to try and stop myself and to think about focus and becoming indistractable. I think we've got so many distractions that we as educators need to realize this. We need to work on how we are pacing our content, and I think if you were to deliver a classic sort of hour lecture to modern students, without any interactivities, without thinking through places where they could stop, think, maybe communicate with their fellow students to consider an idea, I think you just would lose that classroom very quickly, no matter how good a deliverer you were. I think for the modern student, blocking of content, that is breaking your content down into little chunks, and then thinking about little activities into space between those chunks, is pretty key. Sometimes called chunking, so blocking, chunking, whatever term you wish to use. And I also think making sure that that activity sits in a context of other learning resources where the student can access through other means, supporting resources if they're not fully taking it in through lecture is also key.
Thanks, David. That's really helpful. Ben, I'll put this your way if you don't mind. Kind of, what do you think are the main benefits of virtual learning are over the traditional lecture theatre?
What are the main benefits of the virtual versus, okay? Well, certainly we're going to differentiate between synchronous and asynchronous here. So if we talk about asynchronous, certainly that you can learn at your own pace, at your own time. So that is an advantage that is just amazing. So there's no doubt. In terms of synchronous, the main benefit is what I said. Like if you choose to engage, you have the similar distance and barriers as everybody else in the room, so it doesn't depend on where you sit. And the distraction thing David mentioned, indeed, there's a lot of distractions. But to be fair, there's a lot of distractions in the classroom theater as well. So there may be your phone you'll be looking at, there may be your neighbors talking to you, there may be something else going on. So the world is just as it is. And the virtual world, at least, it's got the advantage that you can create your own workspace in the way you want it to be. And if you choose to sit, or if you choose to stand, like maybe it's more relevant when you get older, but when you we all sit a lot, so that's not good for the back. So if you choose to stand while you listen to the lecture or watch it, I mean, yes, you can do so in the classroom, but it kind of looks odd, and not everybody would start doing that. At home you can do that, so it's just you're more flexible in the way you approach it, and that's certainly a good thing.
Follow-on question from that, actually, is there anything you miss about being in the physical kind of classroom environment? Is there anything that you you miss? You know.
Yeah, definitely. It's that interaction with our students. You know, we've all gone into teaching because we like sharing knowledge, and you know, there's nothing better than having a great discussion, or you know, somebody challenging what you've just taught, or saying, well, or coming up with a different scenario. That's what we all enjoy, and or just, you know, bumping into people, or you know, getting a sense, as I've talked about the feeling in the room, and the, you know, the buzz, or the, you know, all everybody's a little bit struggling, so you can add in some support. So yes, definitely miss the human interaction.
It was all flashed off for me there. I'm not sure what happened. We
did for me
questions.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Couple more questions that have come in. They're still coming, actually. An interesting question, actually, around assessment, and how does the assessment work online, and how are you measuring the sort of the outcomes? You know, I think the concern here is that perhaps the person completing that assessment might not actually be the student, perhaps. How are we checking that, and how are we kind of measuring kind of you know, the student outputs?
So to everybody, or specifically someone?
Ben, do you want to take that one? Sorry.
Well, I mean, first of all, there's different kinds of assignments or assessments. So assignment, written assignment, essay. I mean, yeah, we never know who the actual author is. We just have to trust, essentially, that I mean, first of all, you sign. So if at some point it comes out that you are not the author, you're in big trouble. So that's the one thing. I mentioned trust before in the same way. Trust is relevant here. And then, to be fair, why would you not be the author? Why would you not do your assignment? At least my assumption is, or my understanding of being in the Russell Group University, is not to go there to write assignments to get a title, but to go there to learn something you can take away. And if you do that anyway and engage with it, why would you trust somebody else writing your assignment, maybe completely screwing up for you? Because you don't have any guarantee that whoever you choose to do it will actually do a better job than you can. So that's the one part. The other thing is capstone modules, dissertation. So if I'm your supervisor, we have a whole bunch of meetings across the semester you write it, and to be fair, like at least a meeting 2 or 3. If you're actually not the author of what you're doing and feeding it to somebody, I will at least get a hunch of like, okay, well, there's something not right, so, and I can follow up. So it's kind of hard, and okay, we've got 24-hour take-home exams, and of course, same story. Yes, you sign that you do it. If you have somebody else doing that, maybe we never find out. That could be the case, but first of all, why would you want to do that? Why would you trust somebody doing that and delivering a better performance than you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, the same rules apply, don't they? Whether you're learning physically in person on campus or whether you're learning virtually. You know, the same rules around plagiarism and sort of being responsible for your own work absolutely apply, and they would be dealt with in the same way by the university. Interesting question that should come in is around pass rates and grades. How do the grades compare sort of pre, during, and post kind of lockdown and pandemic? Are we seeing any changes to sort of performance at all? David, maybe?
In terms of my experience, I have not seen students disadvantaged by what we've actually seen in terms of the results. So when I've gone to the exam boards for particularly the accounting and finance ones, which is where my module sits, there's no clear evidence at all that any students have been really disadvantaged on average by the move to digital learning and the COVID situation. I think our lecturing staff have made incredible efforts to move their materials online, to provide high quality materials at a very short notice. And I think that's it's a credit to them that the marks that the students have been able to achieve in that environment have not been suffered, and the students have had a wealth of resources to study with and so forth.
What I may add in terms of dissertation and even some assignments, I think I was even in increase in marks, and I was talking to some of my my former dissertation students in the debriefing, and so they were kind of revealing that, you know, to be fair, what else should I do? So everything was closed. I couldn't do much. So I was just focusing on studying because I couldn't go out, couldn't see friends, couldn't have parties. So it's just okay. Well, Netflix, at some point you've seen everything you want to see anyway, so it could as well work.
Absolutely. Question coming. I'll pose this one to Jill. How do you maintain networking and peer-to-peer interaction through virtual learning?
Yeah, that's a really good question, isn't it? I think through the use of the VLE, so virtual learning environment, which is Canvas at Newcastle University, and the integrated use of Teams with my modules, and that has given the structure to the module through Canvas and the learning materials, but it's also provided that space for students to ask questions of the teaching staff, but also to interact with each other. So we've, you know, this was the students starting with the university in October, so everybody very new, and they are now they're starting to answer questions on help each other, and that's starting to build that peer-to-peer learning. With the students working in group work, because they've got the collaboration tools, they're able to give each other feedback within their group, but also what we'll do is we'll allow that peer-to-peer feedback. So we'll allow students to review each other's work and give feedback on that. So those are all things that have been able to be developed.
And I know outside of the programs as well, outside of the academic part of the program, the career support now has all moved online. So there's virtual networking events and interactions with alumni and employers and organizations. And also on the social side, the societies, the Students' Union have moved a lot of societies online as well. So there's lots of kind of activities students can get involved in away from their course to meet people and make friends and grow their networks outside of their own subject area as well. So there is a lot of support and a lot of help available there as well.
Yeah. And I encourage students to connect with me as well through LinkedIn. And so, you know, now I've got a network of students who, you know, sometimes message me because their employer has got an opportunity and they want to target Newcastle University students specifically. Or, you know, I saw a post from an alumni about team working. She's working in a team, and she posted, and so I shared that with I got in touch with her. I said, can I share this? And I shared it with the current students. So it's building up that full circle, not just that peer-to-peer and those networks whilst you're at university, but they're lifelong networks that go on afterwards. And the university's got NCL Spark, where you can contact with alumni if there's a particular industry you're interested in or a particular employer. And these are worldwide. These aren't just, you know, in the UK. So, and we have, as you say, all those events as well. So there's a lot of opportunity through different routes and modes to create lifelong networks.
Fantastic. Yeah. The questions are still coming in. I'm hoping you're all okay just to stay on for a few more minutes because there's some really interesting sort of ones coming in as well. A couple of people have actually asked this. You know, that they come from countries where perhaps access to the technology or affordability is an issue when it comes to sort of getting some of the new hardware and software. Have you got any advice for any schools or students who are struggling to sort of provide that technology or get access to the technology? You know, how can they, you know, continue to learn online? Is there any sort of help that we can?
Just from a sort of a point of supporting our students, we have invested in something called Windows Virtual Desktop here at the university, and Windows Virtual Desktop is effectively you can use your laptop as a platform to access our servers and access all of the software and everything else you would need as if you were sitting at one of our Newcastle University Business School's computer labs. All of the same software is on there for you to use. So actually you don't need a very high spec computer. You can log on to Windows Virtual Desktop, log on to our servers, and from our servers, which are obviously located in the UK, you can access all of the resources and so forth. So while I understand many students are maybe worried about sort of the hardware that they have, that's a great resource to bypass a number of the usual restrictions we'd assume for some online learning.
Excellent. Another question just come in. I'll open this to all three of you, and whoever jumps in first can answer. What's the best mode of giving an online examination? What do you think is the best kind of online examination or assessment?
Viva Voice. Yeah, I don't think we'll be doing many of those, unfortunately. So my PhD student has their Viva coming up.
Yeah, an online interview type.
Yeah.
I didn't catch what you said.
Right. Yeah. But are there any assessment methods or tools that you've used that have been particularly successful, during this period?
I think we moved so quickly onto online, so I haven't got massive experience. But for me, what I would say was it would depend upon the subject, and it would depend also on the level at which you were examining. So there would be factors to take into account. Obviously, very numerical subjects may lend themselves to a different mode to an essay-based subject, for example. So I would add that it would depend on the subject and the level. So whether you're teaching first year undergraduate to postgraduate and masters. So that would be my comments to that, Dave.
Well, my comment would be that essays have been the way to go to test the deeper understanding, because I know this. When I was a student, it sounded weird to me. Why an essay? Like, why not an exam? You're in a room, 90 minutes, no material. Like, this is the question, answer it. But basically, what that does is it is nothing else but making you a computer, like memorizing stuff and spitting it out at moment X. The moment you walk out the door of the exam, you've forgotten it anyway. And the lecturer will essentially look at a few lines of text that whatever you can produce, and basically test if you manage to copy what's on your hard drive and write it down. In an essay, when you have especially if a broad question, when you are asked to really engage with a topic, to show and to demonstrate that you have read and understood the literature, are aware about the theories behind why something is expected and how things should work, and then you're asked to discuss it and to show that you can put the pieces together and write that outcome and maybe a sentence at the end. This is something where we as academic staff can say, okay, this student really engaged with the literature, knows what he or she is talking about, and not particularly somebody spent the last 2 or 3 days memorizing our scripts, walking into a room and then spitting it all out.
Absolutely. I'm going to read this next question, and we might need to make this the last question, unfortunately, just for time. But it's come from one of the viewers in Argentina, actually. In your experience, do you think that the syllabus content can be fully developed into virtual education, or does it need to be shortened? I think what they're asking is, can you deliver the full postgraduate or master's program, perhaps, or undergraduate program, virtually, or do you need to adapt and change it to be able to deliver it online?
May I? Of course we can, but it goes back to the gym membership. So the material is there, whether you engage with it or not, this is up to you. So we're not talking about like everything about producing videos for you to watch. The reading material, the textbook, everything that is behind the learning, that is there anywhere, regardless of online or offline. That's there anyway, and whether you deal with it, whether you engage with it and go through it, that has nothing to do whether it's online or offline. It's simply a question of personal motivation, personal discipline, and decision to actively engage with that. So from that perspective, we will certainly deliver everything in terms of content online. So it's not then, if for some reason this goes on longer than we expect right now and we continue to be online, it's not that you get a Newcastle Light degree or something. You get the same amount of material, maybe even more, because it's just lecturers get more used to put stuff online and point you to things. But again, if you choose to go down the road, that is absolutely up to you, offline and online.
I think what students are telling me is that they're actually finding they're engaging better with it because they've developed these skills, all these skills that we've talked about that time management and that motivation. What they're saying is they are then watching or engaging with the lecture materials, but then they're working through the lecture examples or the curated materials that we've provided, whereas perhaps they would have maybe gone to the lecture and thought, oh well, I've done that for this week. So now they've developed the skill of managing their own learning and taking responsibility for that. They're actually finding that they're engaging more with those additional materials that are available. So I think that's been a positive shift for those that have taken that learning into their own hands that we've talked about throughout the presentation.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to stop the questions there. I mean, they're still coming in. We will, those of you who have asked a question, we will take a log of all of these and we'll try and answer them kind of afterwards through different channels. But we really do appreciate it. We've had questions from Myanmar, the Philippines, Bangladesh, Argentina, Ecuador. So, you know, it really is a global audience today. So thank you all so much for taking part and sort of joining in and asking those questions. Kirsty, I don't know if you just want to say a few words to finish off.
I think to just repeat what Dave said, thanks everyone for joining us. You know, it's really great to see people engage with these topics that we find really fascinating, and we develop them in the hope that you do as well. I think what we can take from it is the lecture theatre will never go away, and we're all happy for that. But we're definitely developing new and exciting ways of learning. And I think if we all take it on board, then everyone's going to go far with it. So thank you to all of our panelists, giving up your time. This has definitely gone on longer, which I see as a positive, because we can say there's a definite interest in that. So, and thank you to Advent and Access for giving us the platform to discuss this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye bye. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much.